straw men. I'm hearing that there's wide agreement that God, if the universe is not to have a purpose, then it must mean that God doesn't exist. But I think the universe doesn't have a purpose, not because I think God doesn't exist, but because I look at the universe and conclude that the universe doesn't have a purpose. Nothing to do with whether God exists or not. We can go on to discuss that as well, but it's not. It's simply wrong to say that we've agreed that the universe will have a purpose if God exists. And I've also heard it said that it's not possible to live a fulfilling life without a freedom-bestowing God. Well, I think that's a terrible mistake. And there are lots of us who live extremely fulfilling lives with a wonderfully purposeful experience, in which we do our own purposes, but that doesn't mean the universe has a purpose, and it doesn't mean that there's a freedom-bestowing God. I've heard it's a bizarre figment, that things seem to have a purpose, that there is function and order in the world. I don't think it's a bizarre figment at all. I think we've amply demonstrated that it's quite possible to have order and pattern and complexity in the world without there being a destination and without there being a top-down designer. And we've heard from Rabbi Walpick that people live their lives by things other than science. And rightly so, of course they do. But that doesn't mean that we can find in that, other than science, the definition of God. That's the God of the gaps. I mean, I could just as easily say the great spaghetti monster is therefore exists because you live your life by more than science. The search for the purpose in life is a bit like the search for the secret of life itself, which theology thought it had a stranglehold on for many centuries. And then as science began to investigate, first of all it fell back to saying, well, yes, there's special chemicals for life, but then they synthesized urea, and that argument went out the window. So then they said, well, there's going to be special protoplasm. There's something mystical and irreducible in living organisms that is not present in non-living. And then we found that a very simple chemical called DNA actually explained everything we needed to explain. And then we said, well, the genetic code is going to be very special. It's going to have unusual features that we will never be able to understand. But it turned out to be a simple linear digital recombination. And then we found that the genetic code was a frozen accident. And then we looked for special human genes, and we didn't find them. We found we've got the same 21,000 genes as a mouse. We just use them in a different pattern and a different order. So I think the search for a purpose in life is like the search for the secret of life. It's simply retreating. They're retreating step after step to try and find it in physics, to try and find it in the Big Bang, to try and find it in the initial conditions of the universe. Anywhere where at the moment we can't understand something. But to say that the purpose of life is not to understand something doesn't seem to me to be a very satisfying answer.